Rarely will I tell people that they're watching a piece of media the wrong way. We have a whole branch of media studies about how people consume media for their own uses and gratifications. But, to paraphrase the immortal words of user Bumblebee Bats from Tumblr, some people are just trying to order a milkshake from Home Depot. Take Francois Ozon's sleeper suspense thriller Swimming Pool from 2003. If, like me, you watched this film on late-night cable, assuming it was a straightforward nod to Hitchcock, you were probably confused and disappointed that the film seemed to end right as the plot began. In fairness, when I watched this film in my early 20s, there were distractions. If you take the plot literally, it's a ridiculous and muddled viewing experience saved only by a stellar performance by Charlotte Rampling and a frequently nude Ludivine Sagnier. There is, as with many Ozon films, plenty of symbolism to parse. But even film scholars well-versed in psychoanalytic analysis struggle to make sense of this film. It is, at times, as opaque as the tarp that covers the titular recreation device. But buried beneath the surface, both literally and figuratively, is Ozon's thesis that artistic creation is messy, chaotic, painful, and often confusing. And so is this film. But when you're a creative, you'll find that you frequently have something inside you that just needs to get out, no matter how painful it is. If you have a favorite mind-bending thriller you'd like to share, please do so in the comments. And of course, we'll be skimming both the surface and the depths of this film, and we're bound to pull in some spoilers, so be warned. The Cliff's Notes version of the story is that Sarah Morton, played by Charlotte Rampling, is a commercially successful but creatively frustrated novelist whose publisher, played by Game of Thrones' Charles Dance, offers her his French villa so she can write in solitude. Instead, the publisher's effervescent daughter Julie, Ludivine Sagnier in a memorable star-making performance, shows up to distract Sarah with loud sex and generally obnoxious behavior. Julie's conduct becomes more erratic, culminating in the murder of a young waiter from the local cafe. Sarah helps Julie cover up the murder, and then, well, you just have to watch the movie. Ozon is hardly the first to use a metaphorical story to detail the creative process. Just a year earlier, Spike Jonze and Charlie Kaufman brought us the wildly inventive Adaptation, a film that played with the narrative expectations as a means to show how a struggling writer can be stymied by writer's block. And later films like Birdman, Mother, and Black Swan also used reality-bending techniques to disorient the audience and pull them into the mind of the creator. Hell, even The Shining is partially about the sheer agony that can sometimes accompany the writing of a novel. But in crafting this story of a Ruth Rendell-ish author trying to jumpstart her creativity, only to come into contact with a distracting sex pot, Ozon intentionally treats the fantasy scenes on the same place as the reality scenes to make a point about how creation can feel muddled. Characters appear, disappear, and reappear with no explanation. Details are spotlighted for the audience and then given an explanation that is contradictory to other information we've already been given. Motivations and personalities can change on a dime. And that's what happens as inspiration turns into drafts and revision. It's a style that provides just enough chaos to be disorienting, without the visual cues or inciting incidents to accompany it, and prepare the audience for the shift. This is because, unlike many of the films that feature an unreliable narrator, Swimming Pool doesn't give us a narrator who is unreliable because she is a liar or because she has the inability to distinguish reality from fiction. It's because we're watching our main character create a fiction out of the pieces of her reality, complete with the second-guessing, contemporaneous revision, and bursts of inspiration that creatives all feel. Instead, it's better if we think of the film less like Shutter Island and more like The Usual Suspects, in which Kevin Spacey's Verbal Kint weaves an entire impromptu heist movie based mostly off things he reads on a bulletin board. But unlike Verbal, who has to keep everything consistent in real time, Sarah is working through her narrative, so pieces get revised, Chekhov's gun gets put in the drawer, and new elements get introduced to take the place of the old ones. Now, all cards on the table, almost nothing in the film after the 22-minute mark happens, or at least doesn't happen the way the film presents it to the viewer. As Roger Ebert implied in his review after seeing the film at the Cannes Film Festival, there's only one way this movie works, and that's that the character of Julie doesn't really exist. But if the character Julie doesn't exist, then none of the other events, from the loud sexual tryst to the seduction of the caretaker, to Frank's murder and its subsequent mystery arc, can exist as is either. In searching for film theories for this video, what I mostly turned up, besides a lot of thirsty dudes posting about Ludivine Sagnier, was more questions than answers. The original IMDb forums are defunct, but early DVD and home theater forums, cinephiles and the like, were all over this. And sadly, most of them went away puzzled or complaining that Ozone didn't know what he was doing. And nothing could be further from the truth. If we recognize that Julie is the manifestation of Sarah's id, hungry, horny, vivacious, and frequently distracting from the task at hand, then Julie serves as the polar opposite of Sarah's repressed outward demeanor. Whereas Sarah brings low-fat yogurt, low-calorie sweetener, and diet soda with her, Julie stocks the fridge with decadent cheese, chocolate, and liquor. While Sarah makes polite small talk with a man she fancies at the cafe, Julie brings home multiple random men, one of whom doesn't even know her name.
J'ai oublié son nom. Une petite blonde.
Julie?
For noisy sex in the living room. Sarah is restraint, Julie is her inner desire for indulgence trying to get out. In fact, when the two first meet, Julie clocks that Sarah is English in spite of her flawless French, because Sarah is dressed in a dowdy nightgown.
Are you English?
It's not surprising that Sarah casts Julie as a woman who exploits her greatest resentments. Sarah feels pent up, creatively because of her book career, and sexually because of John's polite rejection. And Julie is the given reason for why John can't meet up with Sarah.
Would you come and visit me?
Well, I have got my daughter.
And yet, here Julie is, the manifestation of John's lies and the desirable woman Sarah no longer identifies with. Anyone who has ever tried to finish a project, especially a creative project, will understand this disruptive voice that nags at you to move away from the process. It's the urge to do the dishes or vacuum or rearrange your furniture. It's treating yourself to dinner or drinks or that casual hookup you have on speed dial because you've earned it by writing your 2 pages, damn it. This pushy id is usually unhelpful, but ultimately, it's necessary to jar you out of the rut when you experience creative complacency. And your desires are often the genesis of quality personal storytelling. And that's just what happens 45 minutes into the film. And understanding what happens here is key to interpreting the rest of the story. Sarah finds herself watching Julie flirt with Marcel the groundskeeper, and her most recent conquest before the three of them disappear behind a shrub. Inspired, Sarah scraps her novel, the most recent tome in her long-running Dorwell detective series, and starts writing about Julie. And there's this wonderful Hitchcockian moment where the camera glides over Sarah's shoulder to show the doorway to her bedroom, and then glides over to the other shoulder to show the bed. This moment will be revisited at the end of the film between Sarah and Marcel. It's the inspiration that makes Julie more than just a metaphorical nuisance. She's a template Sarah can project characteristics onto as a main character. And this is a story beat most viewers, including me for the longest time, struggle with. Swimming Pool the movie is about Sarah Morton's attempt to break out of her complacent writing and to try something bolder. She initially starts writing another Dorwell mystery novel, incorporating elements of her vacation. It's light and unchallenging for her, and because she craves a challenge, her subconscious voiced this spirited young nuisance on her to disrupt the process. And Sarah does her best for about 20 minutes of the film to keep Julie from distracting her. She asks her to be quiet, she uses earplugs to keep the sex sounds from bothering her. She is cold and distant when Julie tries to talk to her. Every effort is made to push Julie out of her brain so that she can concentrate on Dorwell. It's not until Sarah is sitting at her desk writing when she overhears Julie introduce her latest anonymous lover to Marcel the caretaker and jokingly introduce Marcel as her father that Sarah makes the switch. After they disappear stage right, Sarah begins her new Julie story. It's also worth noting that both of Julie's lovers disappear after a single night, and that Julie's first lover openly rejects her the following morning, telling her he has to get to work. Despite her efforts to spend more time with him, another quickie before he leaves or driving him to work, he politely just wants to get away from her. It's not all that different nor all that surprising that this is the way that John has treated Sarah. And it's at this moment where Marcel becomes something of a stand-in for John, Julie's father. John offered Sarah the villa to help clear her head, and Julie comes along to request that Marcel clear the swimming pool, which is a barely disguised metaphor for Sarah's creativity and indulgence. He's literally clearing the detritus from the pool and figuratively clearing away Sarah's creative baggage. In fact, for the obsessive Easter egg hunters, which I guess includes me, what has my life become? The prop pages that Sarah is reading directly after this are Ruth Rendell's short story Paperwork, about a protagonist who is abandoned by her mother and whose childhood is, as a result, less than stellar. So from this point forward, Swimming Pool is not a film about a Ruth Rendell or Patricia Highsmith avatar writing a hacky mystery novel over the objections of an annoying pixie dream girl. It's about the dream girl herself and her relationships. And we can see this in the beautiful lingering shot where Julie tells Sarah about breaking the heart of her first love. In Rampling's performance, you can see Sarah not only listening, but processing the backstory as a writer. Sarah tries to get information about Julie's mother, but Julie cuts her off and asks to order dinner. Then, just as Julie is sharing her most intimate details, she interrupts herself and says that she's boring.
I'm sorry I'm boring you with my stories.
No, go on. I'm enjoying it.
This is Sarah wondering if she's writer enough to flesh out Julie as a character who can carry her own story. This is also where viewers, especially sharp-eyed viewers, get confused. Mysterious things keep happening, usually things involving Julie, and it just feels like the audience needs to link them together or parse through an explanation. Some of the mysterious events include Julie having a scar on her belly that immediately points to her having a C-section at some point, Julie pretending to be on the phone with John and then handing Sarah a dead line, Julie flirting with two men before disappearing behind some trees, and later Sarah finding Julie's panties on the ground near the pool, Sarah removing a crucifix over her bed only to have it reappear after Julie sneaks in and reads her manuscript, Julie telling Sarah that she lived in Nice with her mother, but Marcel's daughter later telling Sarah that Julie's mother died in a car accident and acting highly cryptic about it, Julie showing up with a black eye after getting hit by a man we never meet, and of course, most notably, Frank's murder. In a murder mystery story, these elements would be vital clues to unpack. We would either solve the mystery of who killed who, or some deep-seated psychological explanation would be given as to why a character went off the deep end. But after the 45-minute mark, this is no longer a mystery story. This is a character study of a young girl who is full of life, but occasionally engages in self-destructive behavior. The problem is, Sarah's reflexive drive is to return to the mystery novel.
Et le titre, c'était quoi?
Je sais pas en français, en anglais. Dorwell, Where's It Killed?
So now, instead of Julie poking her head in to interrupt the mystery novel, the elements of a mystery novel leak back into Julie's story, turning her Harlequin coming-of-age tale into a thriller.
My mom wrote a book too. It was a love story with a happy ending. But what he wants is blood, sex, and money. That's what you give to him, isn't it?
Yes, but I like all that too.
But these invasive story elements are just that. Elements. Bits and pieces of story trash backwashing into Sarah's story about Julie. Julie's mother died in an auto accident, which is tragic and affected Julie deeply, but it's not nefarious. That's also where Julie got the belly scar.
How did you get that scar on your stomach?
Is that for your book?
Yes.
A car accident.
And after killing Frank for no discernible reason other than rejecting her, Julie explains to Sarah that she killed him
For you. For the book.
It's a confounding explanation for a literalist, but when you realize what Julie is saying is that she doesn't think that she's interesting enough to carry the book, and that she thinks Sarah deep down wants to return to mysteries, it makes perfect sense. Frank's murder is Julie's gift to Sarah to put in the book, and an apology for not being a strong enough character to be the lead. Of course, Sarah doesn't want that. It's just her subconscious wedging in a murder to a story that doesn't need one. This is why Sarah is so nonchalant about hiding the body. It's not a real murder, but it is an important one. It's the last piece of burying the Dorwell novel before Sarah can write the real thing. It's why, after Frank is buried in the ground, Julie finds a copy of her mother's novel to give to Sarah. And it's Julie's mother's story that will pad the rest of Sarah's new novel. Sarah's mystery appetite has been sated, and now she can move on to writing the family drama that has been struggling to get out since Julie arrived. And all that leads to the final twist in which John rejects the novel, something Julie told Sarah he would do.
But what he wants is blood, sex, and money.
So she made a deal with another publishing house. And on her way, Sarah meets Julia, John's actual daughter, thus sending the precursors of r/film theories into a titter thinking Julie was some sort of con woman, or that Sarah was delusional, or that the swimming pool was haunted. No, seriously. But the truth, as Ozon admits, is far more mundane. It's all just a metaphor for the creative process. Authors tend to piece together narratives from ideas they already have rattling around in their head, people they meet, or desires they may have yet to act on. And frequently, other ideas interfere with that. That's all that's happening here. None of this is to say that Ozon doesn't pack this film with imagery and metaphor that actually does mean something. One of the more confusing scenes is when Julie freaks out after the murder and thinks that Sarah is her mother.
Merci, maman. 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 Maman.
Julie! Julie, I'm not your mother.
This caused massive speculation among film fans that Sarah really is Julie's mother, since there is an implied relationship with Julie's father and that Julie secretly knows this. But what Julie says is true, from a certain point of view. Sarah not only created Julie, but there's a part of her that desires to be with John. And while this never actually happens on screen, we do get a scene in which Sarah dons John's wife's dress and seduces Marcel, who Julie jokingly referred to as her father. Sarah fantasizes about assuming the role of John's lover, and so she does, with a surrogate John. And not only does she wear her mother's dress, she seduces him in Julie's bed. This is why the shots of Frank and Julie and later Marcel and Sarah mirror one another. John has been rejecting Sarah throughout the film, so she wants to be desired. And this is why she invents a highly sexualized Julie who hates her father, when the actual Julia is a younger teenager who dotes on her father. Julie is in part Sarah, so Sarah creates her as a woman desired by countless men. But she also writes Julie as a woman who is rejected by men on multiple occasions, because that is how Sarah is feeling. And all of this, while not narratively consistent, is at least thematically consistent with a woman who's trying to give birth to a new creative idea. And, as a somewhat autobiographical account, Ozon's own struggles with creativity on his previous films. As Ozon told Senses of Cinema,
Swimming Pool reflète mes obsessions personnelles en matière de création et, comme il s'agit d'un film d'inspiration, il contient de nombreuses références à mes autres travaux. Le plan caressant dans lequel la caméra fait un panoramique lent des pieds du personnage jusqu'au visage est aussi dans Goutte d'eau. La relation entre Ludivine Sagné et Charlotte Rampling renvoie à 8 femmes. Swimming Pool ressemble aussi à Sous le sable, puisque ces deux femmes vivent dans leur tête.
It's this battle with storytelling that Ozon wants his audience to take with us. When all we see is the finished product, we often think of the creative process as something that comes naturally to some. Instead, as Ozon shows here, the process is more often confounding, exhilarating, turgid, and deeply personal.